Okay, so the first thing is, and Emma, are you going to be putting this in as we go, or did you want to do it after the session?
Yes, I'm hoping to try and do as much, like, kind of just see how I'm getting it in.
Perfect. I will, because of that, I will just deconfirm your schema. Go back into the demo sites. So the first thing, obviously, is that you need to have the schema deconfirmed. Then you go into the setup tab, and this is where you can now add a new indicator. So if I go into the Njernda page right now, and I go into setup, you can see that you can, oh, this is going to be tricky. I just want to, you're going to have to delete these indicators as well. But that, you don't have to do that necessarily now, but just make sure that you do that before you confirm your schema.
That, because you talked about doing that after me, for the life of me, I don't know how.
Okay. So
I kept going, and then I didn't know some of them to remain because that's how they work. I was very confused.
Okay. Okay. So what you're going to we're going to have to go through and just make them inactive. So I can go through and make them inactive while you follow the instructions in the Word document. Okay. So I'll go through and make all of the current ones inactive. You just can go through and put in these questions. But what I wanted to talk about first are the sorry, I'm going to have to mute you. It's messing with my head. Sorry. So I'll have to, I just want to talk about how the different ways that it can look when you set it up before we actually get to the part of entering it. So entering the actual indicators will depend on how you want, because in the portal, there's actually a couple of ways that you can do the surveys that you've actually, like the one that you've got, and then it has consequences for how it's displayed on the dashboard. So I guess before you start entering in those indicators, it's probably good to have a sense of how you want to look at the end first before you decide which one. So the first way that you can do it is using the item selection question type. So with item selection, what happens is that when you, so you do all of these things up the top here, you know, make sure it's active. You do per cycle, which means that you would ask it each quarter. You apply it to every kind of setting type, because at this point in time, you probably only are using one, but either way, you would just more than likely apply it to each setting type. Then you select item selection from the drop-down menu. The label is the question, and then you put in the number of these, like the 4 things that you had in your survey questions. When you do the selection count, you put 0 to 4. Now, we put 0 as the first number because that means you don't require a response, okay, because they may not need help with any of those. And then you put 4 because their maximum number is 4, because they may need help with all 4 of those things. So in this instance, you would do 0 to 4. If you wanted to force an answer, then you would put a 1 as your first number. So that way, by saying 1 to 4, then it means that they can only, like, they have to select something. The problem with that, obviously, in this instance, is that you don't, they may not need help with any of them, which is why we have it at 0. So I just want to be clear on that in terms of the numbers. If you had a question that you wanted people to select just one from a list like that, then you would do 1 to 1 as a number. So the selection count would be 1 to 1. That would force an answer, and it would mean they could only enter one answer. Similarly, if you if they could skip that question or have one answer, you would do 0 to 1. So, and it might, you know, sometimes you might want to have people select up to 3 things. So you could do 0 to 3 with that. And then the preview, just to be conscious that the preview won't have the last line unless you press enter after that, which I never do, so that's why that's missing down here. But you click on create, and then that then creates the indicator for you. So that'll be the survey question. So the other way, so I've done that again, sorry, with using the item selection for the next lot of questions. And this is only red because when I entered it, I forgot to put that in. And so it came back with a warning saying that I hadn't put the from count in. And so I needed to put that in. And then you would do a yes, no question for the last question because it doesn't quite sit in the logic. If you're doing a tell us which of the following you would like support to connect with, and then you have a list, do you attend playgroup doesn't fit. So we had to do a yes, no question as a separate indicator type here. So really simple question. Just being really conscious too around this place after. The place after shows you where you're going to put it in the survey. So, you know, you might you might think of another question that should go in between a couple of questions. So in that case, when you select the place after, you just go into the drop down and you can place it after whichever indicator you want it to go after. This is something I just wanted to highlight around yes, no questions is you can also allow not applicable. So if you allow, yep.
It's not allowed to move forward. I can only get to the preview bit.
Just trying to think.
And then
sorry.
Yep, so I'm at the bit.
Yep.
And then how to get past the preview. I just click on create.
You just click create. You don't click on any of those boxes. The boxes are just the, like that's a preview of the what the question's going to look like. It only says update. Hang on. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Can you share your screen for a sec?
How did you do that yesterday?
So there's just a share content button down the bottom of the screen.
Oh. Has it come up?
Yep. You must have edited an existing indicator, did you? Because it says edit family survey indicator at the top. Yeah, okay, go down. So when you've got enrollment support, you can click on edit, and that's fine.
Yeah.
That first one that you've got there. Yep. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so that's fine. So you must have entered it. And then it's just have a look. Yeah, and so that's why it's coming up as update now. So if you need to change it, then you could. Yep. But before you go too far in adding these indicators, I'm gonna actually, do you want to stop sharing your screen again? And I will now go back to sharing mine. I'm going to mute you as well. Yeah, okay, you can mute yourself. Thank you. Sorry, 2 secs. Okay, so just in terms of the reason I just don't want you to go too far with adding those indicators yet is just because you may not like the way that data displays, and so it might be better to wait until you've had a squiz at it first to see which way you prefer, because they do have very different ways of displaying based on the indicator that the way that which type of question you use. So that's the first lot. And yeah, just wanted to draw attention to this not applicable. This is always if they are allowed to skip the question, you want to put in that allow not applicable. So, or, you know, because it may be yes, no, or it may not be applicable. So say if you were talking about whether someone needed help with speech pathology, for instance, it may be not applicable. It may be no, but it may be not applicable, whichever one works. But that's also another important bit, because if you are asking something like, do you want support with speech pathology, and they say, like, do you want to have a not applicable, or do you just want to have a yes and no? So yeah, it's up to you on whether or not you have the not applicable, but just make sure that if you do want it, that you check that box. Otherwise, it'll just have yes and no on the screen. So this is how that particular survey will look, which I think is fairly clean. You know, it's not a bad looking survey. It looks pretty simple to fill in. You just check the boxes. So that's pretty cool. The next one is where you would set up, it takes a little bit longer to set this one up, but this is where you have yes, no questions for all of them. So basically you would just go through, enter in each question with a yes, no. Now, the interesting thing about that, whether you want it or not, is, you know, because it may not be important, but what you could potentially do with that one is to have, you can change the wording a bit more, like maybe, you know, the wording doesn't quite work as well with one of the statements as the others, whatever. And so that way you can just change it. You can be a bit, because you're doing each individual question. So there's a little bit more flexibility on that one if that's what you'd like to do. Then this is what that survey would look like. So again, I don't think it's too overwhelming. You'd probably, like, maybe if you're setting it up, don't do the not applicables. It's up to you, completely up to you what you'd like to do on that one. Then the last one is a bit different. So this one I set up as having a header, and then I set up the indicator. So the header was actually, would you like help with the following? So when you see the survey, it'll say, would you like help with the following? And then the questions will just be like, you know, Assessment Australia cognitive assessment, yes, no, or not applicable. And so this is the way that particular survey looks. So you can see you've got the header, which is actually the question. And then you've got each of the those particular things. Which I've obviously left one off there, but anyway, that's fine. And yeah, you can see through that in terms of what people are, you know, like it's pretty easy in terms of what they'll see. So either way, it's up to you which way you want to set it up. The thing about this one is that if this is your preferred setup, then what you'll have to do is make sure that, oh, actually, I'll get to that in a minute because it comes a little bit further down. So what, just looking at these three kinds of surveys, which one do you think would, oh, actually, no, sorry. I'm going to skip right ahead to the dashboard part and how that looks. So this one, let me just switch to the actual portal. Oops, that is not what I wanted to do. Sorry, just trying to move my screens over. Okay. So I'm just going to go back to the demo DT2 site. So this is how each of those surveys could potentially look. So this is the first one. This is the one where you put in, they select the items from the list. So just to show you which survey that was. So that's this survey here. And that ultimately looks like this. Okay, so you can see that 18 people need support with enrolment, 17 with birth certificates, immunisation, 12, etc. So I think that's a pretty neat way of looking at it. It probably gives you a pretty good understanding of, you know, which ones you needed to focus on, etc., which is the intent of these surveys, is to, you know, so that you can actually work that out. Then when it comes to connection support, and this is where, just to be really clear, these titles here come from the name that you give the indicator. So this bit here, this title for the indicator details, is actually really important. I've just kind of dumped whatever in there, but when you're setting it up, because you don't have a lot of characters in the title, but what will happen when you create your the dashboard, it will pick up the indicator title. So you want to have something that means something to you so that you can actually identify what it is that you're looking at from that indicator perspective. So it can just say playgroup, for instance, and that might make sense. But you'll see in some of them that I've done, it doesn't necessarily make sense. So like enrollment support, probably not the best title, but that might be fine as long as you can explain it to your partners. That's the main thing. So enrollment support, connection support, playgroup. So this is yes and no. So you can see in March, because I've put some test results in, March is, you've got 2 no's and 10 yeses. In June, there's 3 and 7. So this is how you can potentially see the data using that first survey type, which I think is probably pretty neat, to be honest. Then I did the other one as a service survey just because it was easier to do it separately so that I could keep them separate when I was filling them in. Service surveys, so we've got, birth registration, yes, no. So you can see again, it gives you a bit of a comparison around yes and no's. Do you really want to see the yeses and no's, or do you just want people to, to identify, that this is what they need? So this is where it really depends on what it is that you're looking at trying to achieve. So those are, I probably think this is the most effective way of representing it, in which case the way that you've just entered it in the portal is the way that you would do it, but I just wanted to show this first. Okay, so I'm going to go back now because I kind of want to go a little bit more around the collection process as well, just to be really clear on that. Actually, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into the setup tab here just to show you the dashboard layout. So I've added the dashboard layout and I've made it available. So when you go into setup, what happens is this is where you have to make sure that this first box is checked, available to view, because what often happens is people forget to do that and you can't see it on the dashboard, then they wonder where it is. So that's the first thing, and one of the major reasons why a dashboard may not be visible, or the data may not be visible. The other major reason is usually because the survey collection period hasn't been finalised. So I'll get to that shortly. I've got one that I can finalise for you to show you through that process. But what we do, we've got these indicators. So what you can see is that there's a whole lot of other indicators that someone set up on the portal. And we don't check those because we don't want any of them displayed. So for now, we're just going to display those ones. So that's how you just basically just go and select, include or not include for each of the indicators. So if you had some questions that didn't have any response, for instance, then you might deselect it because you don't want to see it. I'll just update that. So that's the setup tab. The design tab is where you play around with the charts. So I have I've screenshot how I've set up each of these, but what you do basically is click on the configure tab, and you can just mess around. Like I always like to just play around until you get some sense in what you're displaying, because if we did, say, a pie chart, probably not really meaningful in the way that you're representing the data here. So this for me is where I kind of go, how much does this work when I show it, like, in particular ways? Which one is going to make the most sense? Line chart, definitely not it. And so this is where you can really quickly see whether the chart, is working for you. Now, this is using live data, because I've entered data already. If you're setting up an indicator at the start and you're not sure how something will look, then you can click on demo data, because every single, like anything that's in the portal has some demo data that sits behind it. And that demo data will just allow you to work out, because you can still, even though it's demo data, and so this is, kind of irrelevant, you can still do things like this and just see that this makes no sense whatsoever. Nor does that. then again, once we see this, it does. If you want to, you can separate time periods, but then the count doesn't make any sense. This one, so this shows you, and this might be necessary if you were to display this kind of data over time, then this might be the way that you would do it, because the one that I showed earlier, that very first way that it was configured, had the total across both the March and June periods, and so it was a cumulative total. But what you might want to see, you may only do this twice a year, so you may only do it in the June period, for instance, and then again in the December period, and so then you can compare the each of the criteria between the June and the December period. So this might be a way of doing it down the track as well. So, but this is in terms of configuring the charts, you can change these at any time. So basically at the start, what you might want to do is to have it combined together like I had earlier. And so this way, you know, this is both the March and the June period, but you've got all of that data included in the one chart. So if you were trying to compare between the start of the year and the end of the year, then that would be a different thing. So I'm going to update that one, even though it's the same. But I do want to show you, because I think this is where it gets interesting, because if it's about just comparing across the year, is it better just to have the yes, no answers showing? Completely up to you in terms of how you want to do, how you want to display it. But what you might find is that this is more meaningful, you know, to have the number as a bar chart, and then at the end of the year having the comparison as well. I don't like, you know, for each particular indicator. So then you can go through each one and look at your progress for each one. I'm still unconvinced that I don't know. I still think this is probably the best one for you, but again, it's completely up to you, because it's about what you can explain to your partnership. Actually, just one other thing that I'll just show. You can kind of condense it. I'd never do that for such a complex graph, because you lose all the labels. But you can also make it much wider as well. So if you were to have, oops. So this is where I play around until I get it right. If you were to have the 4 periods sitting there for the year, so you'd only have data in 2, potentially. If you did the surveys in June and December, you would only have the 2, even though March would still be present, but it'd be showing nothing. It'd be showing zeros. So bit of a design flaw from the portal perspective, because in an ideal world you just have June and December. Unfortunately, that's not how it goes. But because I mean, the way that you're looking at using this data is to compare from the start of the year to the end of the year to see if you've had improvement in the number of families that need access to these supports. So even if you had it in, you entered in the March quarter, for instance, and then the December quarter, at least you'd be able to see the comparison in the numbers. And so what you'd be wanting to see is that it has dropped off. So that's our main thing. So I might just update that. So that is now the way that is displaying. This one here, you can see, so here you've got the time periods here, and then different colors indicate the different, each of the answers to the question. But this one here is when you separate it across the axis. And so the axis actually shows the answer values. So these are the answer values separating along the axis. So just it's just a minor difference, but it depends on how you want it to look again. So okay. Okay, I think that's it in terms of setting up of the dashboard layouts. So you can do that at any time. Okay, then I'm going to go to the DET2 site, because I've entered the indicator. So this is the one where it says, would you like help with the following? And then it's got those questions. So this was this survey here, which again, I think looks quite nice. And I haven't really done much of a play with this one yet. So I have put in the setup, I've selected the indicators. So I've deselected all of these other local entry indicators. I'll go back to the schema. Oops, hang on a second. Even though it's using as default, it's not available to view, so I wouldn't have been able to see it. So I just need to make sure that I update that. So available to view, and it's the default dashboard for this site. So when that means the default dashboard means that when someone clicks on your dashboard tab, if they're a reporter or a reviewer or some other what's the other one, viewer, that's the one that it defaults to, the chart that it defaults to. So it's where you kind of have the most useful information. You can separate dashboard layouts out. So you might want to have a focus on, whatever your MCH focus is. You could have that on a separate tab to another. I'm just trying to think of a site that does that quite well. I think it's Casey. Yeah, so you can see, no, not Casey. Can't remember who does it this way, actually. Not Hume either. I know Latrobe do lots, but I don't think they've changed their. Yeah, so you can see here they've got like, Q1. You can sort of like click through to see different layouts. So you can have different layouts based on what you're focusing on, but obviously not many people do it. So, okay. Right, so I'm in now the DET demo site. I've entered these survey indicators. As I said, that was the one that had the headers. We've got the setup just sitting there waiting to be fixed. When you go into, sorry, oops, no. Sorry. No, wrong thing, design. So what happens at the moment, what will display on the dashboard, remember how I said that the indicators matter? In the question, so around the header, when it was in the survey, the question said, do you need help with the following? We don't have enough characters to be able to write everything in these headers, but because the indicator name was header 1 and then header 2, I've changed this one, but in header 2, that's what the indicator is called, header 2. So at this point, if I wanted to use this one, I would go and change it from header 2 to connect with the following, because that was what that question related to. Do you want support to connect with each of these services? And so now it's got that header. So it just makes it a bit more meaningful when you look at it. Because I would definitely change these indicator names, because what does BR, BC and AACA mean? You'd want to have something a little bit more meaningful. As I said, there is a character limit, so it can't be super meaningful, but it can be a little bit more meaningful than BR, BC, AACA. But MCH, hearing, speech, NDIS, that's pretty self-explanatory. So you can pretty well work out what is trying to be, what will be on display there. So again, because I haven't entered any data, we would then go to the demo data to see what each of these charts look like in the configuration. So I'll now go into the collect tab, because what I want to be able to do is to actually enter this data now. So first of all, I've pre-populated all of this stuff because it took forever, and I did that this morning. So if you have other indicators sitting there, you have to make sure that all of your indicators are in the completed status. So just to be mindful of that. But I'm just going to go through now the conduct family surveys part. So I want to open the survey first thing. And now this is where it shows you what the questions are. It'll tell you the responses by date, responses by service. It'll also give you these, you can send out things like this. You can send a link and then people can fill it out themselves. But because most of our surveys are probably going to be paper-based surveys, we'll just go through this one at the moment. So we'll go through method 2, collect and enter paper surveys. So what happens is this is what the survey looks like. This is exactly what families would see if you printed it off. And sorry, I'll go back one. It's going to go back to the collect tab. No, I'm not. I'm going to, hang on, sorry. It is in the conduct tab, and so you could actually print. And so this is what it would look like if you printed off this survey. So you can print it off for families. So you can either do it online or you can print it off, once you've got it in the portal, you can actually print it off like this as well. So go in, we enter, basically just randomly click some results here, submit. So you can see here, it says 1 entry. This survey has successfully been submitted. You may now enter the next survey. That just automatically disappears. Then, so say if you've got like 20 surveys that you've done, you can just then go put them all in each time you go through. Actually, that's a good point. That's what I'll do. So I'm submitting here and it automatically gives you this warning because I didn't select all of them. But when you're doing paper-based surveys, families may not have filled in every single question. So if that was the case, so if they hadn't answered this hearing screen question, what you can do down the bottom is click on this survey has some blank answers and then click submit. So that way you can still submit it, even if it's incomplete, because that was one of the things that, it's a bit problematic because sometimes paper-based surveys don't get completed in full. And so how do you deal with that if you can't show that there's a skip, because otherwise you have to guess what their answer was and we can't do that. So I'll just submit a couple more so we've got a little bit more meaningful data, just so that we can play around with it a little bit. All right, 7 will do. So I'll go back to conduct now. So that's, you can just repeat that process. As you can see, it's really quick when you've got the surveys. It's just enter, and then you've got it. You can see now we've got the responses by date. And so you can actually see that, on the 28th, you've had 7 responses to the survey. We can also tell, so because you can separate these out by service if you wanted to. So I can see here that Best Start Early Learning, you've had 7 via paper responses, but you might have, like if we were to enter this one here. Let's do another one for here as well.
Based on the CMP is ongoing setup responses being confirmed through data collection.
Yep. So the reason that it's doing that is because you are entering new indicators.
Yeah.
In order to enter the new indicators, you can't enter the data yet. So what would normally happen is that when we go to the DET, yeah, but when we have this one, see now it's confirmed, so you can't play around in this one currently. If we go to the DET one, oh no, sorry, I'll have to go to yours. So you haven't confirmed your schema yet because you're still working on your indicators. So once your indicators are in, then you'll confirm. And that's when you can do all this collection period stuff. That's why this session is kind of a little imperfect. Because, yeah. What was that? Yeah. Yep, exactly. So hopefully this will help a little bit, but that's why I wanted to record. Just going to mute you again. Sorry, what was that? That's what I thought. I thought hopefully we can then have that yeah, working okay for you. And I have just muted you again, sorry, because it I feel quite insane. Sorry when I hear myself back. So please just unmute again if you need to say anything. I'm so sorry, but it's yeah. Anyway, okay, so I'll just go back to the DET one. So into the collect tab again, and so you can see, if you wanted to, you can actually look at the results as well. So that's kind of interesting. Just, when you want, if you want to see a breakdown of, the survey results, but this is only viewable by the facilitator. It's generally not available. So then I'll go to conduct again. I'm confident at this point in time that all of the survey info has been put in. So what I'll do is I'll now close this survey. Okay, so the survey is closed and you can see it's completed. So if you want to go into the details, you can do that, and you can actually reopen the survey. For some reason, you get a couple of extra surveys come in late, you can reopen it. But for now, it's completed. We'll go back to collect. Because now the status of all of our surveys is completed, including the entering of the local data. This was so much fun entering all of this anyway. Now we can finalise the process. So you need to finalise before the data will be visible on the dashboard. So I finalise that. Okay, so what it automatically does is it takes you to the survey that you've, to the dashboard site for that particular survey. So as you can see here, this does not look very helpful at all at this point. So we won't, we'll go back and have a squiz more of this in a minute, but I just want to go to the next collection period as well. So you can see that it says here that the status is finalised, but I want to now go to the June quarter. It's pending, so I open it again. Again, I'm just going to put in some answers. So we've got some data. That'll do. It's just so we've got something in there. So I will go down here. I'll close off the survey because I've entered all of that information. Check again that the status is all completed. And this process is also in the facilitator guide. So I do want to be clear that there is a step-by-step instruction for each of these processes that sits in the facilitator guide. So I like to run through it just because I think sometimes it's easier when you've watched it, but sometimes it's easier when you've watched it, then you go back to the guide and then you watch it again perhaps, or whatever, works for you. So hopefully the combination will actually help a little bit. So then I'll click on finalize because I want that data to be visible. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the setup tab and I am going to design this survey, and I'm going to do it with the live data. So this is again where we'll look to see this one here. I'm just going to edit the header because this was around playgroup. Okay. And so again, this is where we just play around with the chart types. This one doesn't look too bad. Like if I wanted to see this, I could just leave it like this because you can see there's, what's that, 7 yeses, 2 nos. We could just leave it like that if you wanted to. But as always, have a little play around. That looks ridiculous. Clearly not going to use it. You might want to do something like that instead. That's combining together the time periods. Oops, sorry. If you separate along the axis, it's the same as that other report, but it's just a bar chart instead. So go back to the column chart. We can clearly see how this looks. You can add the data labels so you can see what the numbers are if you don't want people guessing, which is, especially when you've got big numbers, that's very helpful. Is a pie chart going to be useful? No, not really. So we'd probably keep it like this, and that's really it. That's what you'd leave. If you ever have a situation where you're trying to compare, say, maternal and child health supported play groups, like, so families or services that have responded from those particular areas, what you do is you actually you can, instead of combining together the service categories, you can separate these. So you can see now we've got all of our responses that have been yes, so the yes ratio have been ECEC. So if we had other services theoretically responding, then you'd also have MCH, DET supported play groups, which they're not DET anymore, but anyway, that's the category that's in the system, other, etc. But rarely will you need that, I don't think. But see, again, this is a yes ratio. So this is the number of families who have said yes compared to no. I don't think that's really meaningful in this instance. It might be sometimes, but I don't think it would be. I think, and you can also have a no ratio. So you can see that 33% said no. But I think that this is a more meaningful kind of having a number is probably more meaningful given what you want to do with it. So I've combined together the time periods for this one. So again, you wouldn't do that if you were comparing down the track, if you were comparing time periods down the track. The other thing that I'll show you though, so I don't do by category, I'll do it by period. So what you can also do is you can apply a filter. So this time what we've got is 2 lots of data. So you've got the June 21 data, which shows you that there's been 2 responses of no and 1 response of yes. But in the year to date, it's 4 and 8. So sometimes that's really helpful too, because you might, if you've got something that is changing over the course of the year, you might want to see that kind of a filter applied. I'll update that for a second. And so I'm going to go now to the dashboard. And I'll go to the March period. So what you can see here, the March period has the 2 and 7 and the 2 and 7 for the year to date. If we switch it to the June period, actually switch it, you can see that it's now showing the June data on the portal. So just, just depends on how you want to display the data. If it's something like this that's meaningful, then that's fine too. So it is completely up to you. So this was the 3rd way of setting up your survey indicators. So I wanted to show you the 3 different types because I want you to understand that the way you set up the survey questions does depend, it will actually influence all the way through to how it shows on the dashboard. And so that's where it's ideal to try and get the setup right in the first instance, just so that then you know how it's going to look in the dashboard. So if you're happy, I still think that this first one was probably the best, although I still wouldn't do it like that. I would go here. Oops, the wrong one. I'm going to combine together, update that. So if this is, if you're happy with this, then go in and have a look at the way that this is set up. You can replicate that. But for me, it's much more about just having a play around with the survey indicators in terms of configuring, because I just feel like there's a lot that, when we look at in terms of that configuring, there's a lot of things that don't make sense. And as soon as you start playing around with it, you realize that they don't make sense. So the really important things in the setup tab, while it is deconfirmed, you can play around with the indicators. If the indicators have already been used, then what you have to do is switch them to inactive. So what you're going to have to do, I'm just going to go to your site now. What you are going to have to do, because your schema is not currently confirmed, you can do this. You can't, as I said, you can't, because it has been used, it'll give you an error message if you try to delete it. But what you can do is you can edit it and you can change it to just unselect that is active and then update. It's a pain because it still appears on the list, but where it won't appear is in your surveys. So let's look at this question. Do you have any feedback on how to make finding out about kindergarten easier? So if we look at the, oops, I really needed to go to the right survey. So here you can see this is an ECEC survey, only goes to ECEC. So how easy was it for you to find out about kinder for your child? I've already made that one inactive, but enroll in kinder. So if I go to the preview, these previews are really handy before you confirm the schema, because then you can see exactly what the surveys are going to look like and make sure you're happy with them. If I go there, you can see now that where is it? How easy was it for you to enroll your child in kindergarten is there. We'll go back to the schema. So how easy was it for you to enroll your child in kindergarten? We will edit this one, take it away from being active and update. Then we go back and that question's no longer there. Okay, so you just have to go through and make inactive any of the ones that you don't want to have asked on the survey. So here we'd edit that, change it, so it's no longer active. And so you just repeat that basically so that all of these ones say no. Unfortunately, they still sit in the list. So it's a bit frustrating because you can't get rid of them from the list as such, but they are at least inactive. So when you send out the survey or when you complete the collect tab, they won't be in there. So you won't have to put any of those things in there, which is good. So I would be doing that with all of these ones as well, all of your local entry indicators. Just change all of those ones as well to not active, because that way you don't have to just enter data in. You really don't want that. And these ones here, it doesn't really matter because DET gives you this data. But having said that, we don't have a lot of that data at the moment because of our KIM system being a little bit problematic because we've changed over systems, and it's not the best at the minute. So we don't have a lot of this data yet, but we will have it soon. So setup tab, while it's not confirmed, add any indicators, change any ones to active, from active to inactive, and then you can confirm your schema again. Once your schema is confirmed, this is where you go into the collect tab and you make sure that you just enter all of the details in your survey. You can see here, because this has been finalised, now the option here is to definalise. So once it's been finalised, that's when you can see the data on the dashboard. By changing the status, definalise. So I've definalised March here. If we go to the dashboard now, you can see the June data because the June data has been finalised. But you can see here March has disappeared from the drop-down menu, and it's disappeared because we've definalised it. So the data has to be, the collection period has to be finalised in order for it to display on the portal. So if we go back to collect, it's in the March tab. It's telling us that the status is underway. That's why it's not displaying. We could preview it if we wanted to, but what we really want to do is finalise it so we can see it on the dashboard again. So you've got to make sure that everything, again, that everything is completed, because otherwise it won't allow you to finalise. So every status has to be completed. Finalise the period, go to the dashboard to confirm, and March is back in the drop-down menu. Okay. I am conscious of time, so I think I've covered a fair bit. What basically for you, Emma, at the minute is just to work out exactly how you want it displayed. If you want it this way, just follow the first lot of instructions on this document. So just go through, which is what I see you've done that anyway. So just go through and follow this one, then do the same, for the second lot of questions. Add in the, do you go to local playgroup one as well? And then once you've got those in and made all of the other ones inactive, then you're right to confirm your schema again. Then you can go back and enter your data through the collect tab as well. Look at the portal guide for facilitators for each of those processes. That'll just hopefully go through a little bit step by step, a few screenshots, etc., that might help. But I think that's pretty well it for now. And I know it's a lot. Like, I'm very conscious that it is a lot of info, But once I get the link, I will forward that, and hopefully you can be able to watch this